All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So appreciate everybody coming out tonight. For once, we don't have a tornado warning, an ice warning, or insert warning here. Tonight we have author and retired Lieutenant Colonel Jim Turinetti with us. He's going to talk about the headgear worn under Kaiser Wilhelm II. Jim?
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. I'm overwhelmed. Thank you. And I'm particularly pleased to see so many ladies in the audience, because this typically is something that it's just the guys are interested in. And I think you ladies bring a much softer focus on this. I want to talk about the various helmets. I use the term helmet, even though a couple of them are not helmets officially, they're busbies. But I want to talk about the headgear that was worn by the German Army up to the eve of World War I. In a little background, all of the history that I took in college was military history. And my second assignment in the Air Force was in Germany. And I thought, what a great opportunity. I was at Ramstein. What a great opportunity to get out and touch the ground where these things happen. I got to go through some of the trenches in France. And in 1968, I bought my first white helmet. And bought every one that I saw for the next 3 years. When I got back to the States, I discovered a good half of them were put together garbage. They had been taken by unscrupulous antique dealers. And I got upset. And I said, that's not going to happen again. And so I started studying. I studied in English, which there was very little available. I studied in German. I studied in French. Recognize when I say study, that means I read a book and I had a dictionary so I could translate it. But as a result of that, I've been able to write 8 books that I brought here tonight to share with you some of the things that I found. So let's talk about. That's a picture of Kaiser Wilhelm II. He was the Kaiser during World War I, and was responsible for a lot of the proliferation of the very colorful uniforms that the German Army wore. He loved to dress up his toy soldiers and have them parade around. And every year they had their maneuvers, and every year the Kaiser's forces always won. What good is that? The system in Germany brought the young men into the service when they were 18, and they stayed until they were 45, one form or another. And typically the role of the reserves here was to backfill and strengthen the standing army when they needed replacements. And they had, of course, the active, and then you had the reserves, and then they had the Landwehr, and then they had the Landsturm. Landsturn's the home guard. That's the 40-year-old guys. They became very important once combat started, and they had a pipeline now where they had trained people that they could funnel into it. There was also a select group of people, the professionals, that could bypass active duty if they were willing to go serve for 1 year at their own expense. So they paid for their own horse, they paid for their own uniform, paid their own salary, but it only meant that it was for a year. And then when they finished that time, they moved into the Landwehr as either an NCO or as an officer. I point this out because my focus is the helmet. And so every one of these guys represents at least one helmet, and probably 2 or 3. The enlisted men were issued their helmets by the regiment, and the helmet belonged to the regiment. And they're nicely documented. You'll see stamps from with various numbers. And the quartermaster was very aggressive in taking care of that. The officers, on the other hand, had to buy their own helmets. And so you see a good number of those surviving because they brought them home and put them in the attic. The ratio of enlisted men to officers was about 30-1. So when you see a helmet out in a flea market or one of the places, it's probably enlisted man's, just because there were so many of them. 72% of the Army wore the basic spiked helmet. That's another reason why you've probably seen a spiked helmet, but you haven't seen some of these other ones here, because there were so many. And there were about 750,000 men under arms at the beginning of the war. Spiked helmet came into being in 1840-ish, 1848. And, you asked the question, what protection can this thing have? We think of a helmet as being something that protects our heads. But at that point in time, it was as much decoration and clothing as it was protection. But let's stop a minute and think about what was the threat. The weapons then were large bore, not rifled, muskets. And the concept was, we get all the guys up here shoulder to shoulder and we send this wall of lead that way, and we'll have whoever's in the way, too bad for them. But it wasn't designed to necessarily be accurate or precise. It was just a blanket. Okay, so these had nice high crown, and they were made of a very thick leather. When you come up and look at these up here, you'll see they're thinner. And over time, they did two things happen. The crown shrunk down to more of this level, and the material became thinner. The threat evolved over that time, so that by 1915, when we had trench warfare, these were totally inadequate, and they needed something else. And so this is what evolved from that. And yet I've seen many helmets with bullet holes right there as well, from the poor soldier that stuck his head up above the trench. Didn't make it back. Now I'd like to go through and show you all the different styles of helmets. Remember, I'm a helmet guy, so the whole focus is going to be helmets and the men that wore those things. This is the basic spiked helmet that you always hear about. And my presentation will have the enlisted man's helmet and the officer's helmet. Why the difference? Well, as I told you, the government's paying for one and the individual's paying for the other. And so there's more quality. These are all, you'll be able to see the difference as well when you come up and look at these. Many people have said, gee, why is there a spike on the top? Do they lower their heads and go charging into somebody like a spear? No, it was symbolic of the lance carrier, the infantryman. But for the artillery, they weren't going to be outdone, and so the artillery had balls on the tops of theirs. The sharpshooters, the aviators, the telegraphers all wore this type of hat. It didn't get in the way. It certainly didn't provide any protection for them. And this is called a shako. Significant invention, the machine gun in World War I. And the Germans started by having individual units dedicated to that, and quickly learned that it was an important resource, and so they integrated it into their regiments. So for about 10 years, the machine gun soldiers wore this helmet, or shako. And that's made out of fabric. The others have been made out of leather. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the Saxons, but the Saxons and the Bavarians were very, very independent people. They were not going to be told what to do by anybody. This is the style of one of the infantry regiments of the Saxons. the Szapka. This has an old heritage. It comes from Poland. It's worn by light cavalry, and there's an example here.
Mm-hmm.
And what I don't have is they also wore a cord that fastened the helmet to the body because they lost these. I mean, can you imagine riding with this thing?
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know what value, the value that I guess it has, and maybe the better example is the Busby. It's good protection against a sword slash. Hard to say. It would hit that and slide down. The French dragoons of the early 1800s wore long curls on their sides because a saber slash would actually slide down the hair and be protective. The same idea with something like this. And of course, everybody wants one of the guys on the right with the big eagle on the top, which was what the Kaiser was wearing in my opening slide. These were cuirassiers, and there were different grades of cavalry. There was the light cavalry; those were the Uhlans, guys with the Szapkas, and the Hussars. And then there's the medium cavalry, which were the dragoons, early mechanized infantry without the mechanized part, but they were mobile. And then you had the heavy cavalry, and that's what the men that wore these. Now, I had always wondered what's the significance of heavy and light, and I believe that the significance is the weight of the rider. That the light cavalry is real lightweight guys. And I've seen some of the uniforms that they look like they're children's uniforms, small necks, narrow waists, and so the horses could be lighter. The cuirassiers, on the other hand, were heavy. These were the Shakanoff troops. Their tactic was to charge in together and crash into the other guys and use the weight of their horse and their bodies to disperse them. And then, for a short period of time, they had mounted rifles, Jäger-zu-Pferd, hunters on horseback. And so of course, they had to have their own helmet. And so this one. There were not many of these, and they didn't last a long time. And of course, our favorite was these were the Hussars, and everybody wants one of the death head ones. And this one was from the Kingdom of Braunschweig. So Germany got united into a single country in 1871. Up until then, you had all of these kingdoms and duchies and small political entities working on their own. In fact, during the Napoleonic Wars, the Bavarians fought for the French and the Prussians fought for the English. But by 1871, they'd been united, and they brought all of their armed forces together. And Prussia, being the largest entity in that grouping, tended to set the rules. And so the Prussian uniforms were the model for everybody. And the same thing with their helmets. But in order to at least distinguish that in the field or maintain some of your national, regional pride, they all wore these things, colored devices on their helmets. And on the helmets, on one side, these are called cocards. They wore the national colors, red, white, and black. And then on the left side, they wore the Lands, or local area. In this particular case, it's Prussian for black, white, and black. But as you can see up there, there are a lot of different colors for all of the small places. And of course, you have to be different. So the Uhlans couldn't wear two cocards on theirs. They only wore one, but they wore this fancy device called a field insignia or a Feldzeichen. And again, it's the state colors. So this one is Prussian for black The same thing is true of the Busbies. That's a summary of all the helmet plates worn on all of the helmets. When I started collecting, I decided I wanted one of each of those on each one of the styles of helmets. So now you got 5 styles of helmets, you got 62 plates, you play those good. My wife was very, very understanding. But the detail and workmanship on these, they were made, the officers' pieces were made by jewelers. The enlisted men had mass stampings, and detail isn't quite as fine. But when you come up and look at the eagles, and look at the detail work on the feathers and the scroll work. And then these are the devices worn by the hussars. And the one on the far left, right, is the one that I have up here, and it's from Braunschweig. And Braunschweig, over the years, participated and supported the King's efforts in a lot of the wars. And you'll see there's Peninsula, Sicilian, Waterloo, Mars and Tours. Each one of those was a battle that particular regiment's ancestors participated in and won. And that's it, same thing again. The battles. At least half of those were awarded to the regiment, as a kudo, way to go place, pat him on the head, by the Kaiser when he came into power in the 1890s. And he did it in an effort to gain political support by letting each one of them know that they were special to the Kaiser. So these were the battles that they chose to commemorate. And there's an example of how it would have looked on one of those cuirassier helmets. That is surprisingly lightweight. When I said that's the weight of one of our wheel caps. Great details. And then of course here's this one. I come back to this one because I want to point out when they went on parade, and I didn't bring any of the parade bushes in, but when they went on parade, the infantry and the dragoons, the ones that wore spiked helmets, also wore horsehair plumes. The officers wore European buffalo, and the enlisted men wore horsehair. There's a difference in the fineness of it. For the Busbies, you see, they also wore the feathers. That one is heron, and they also wore vulture. It's dependent on the regiment. When you get to be a general, I brought in a general's helmet so you can see it. These guys got to wear the feathers. And it was always the feather combination of their kingdom. So this one wore black and white feathers. The Bavarians wore blue and white. The Saxons wore green and white. And you'll also see helmet plates with dates on them, and these were the significance of the dates. This is a comment that I made at the beginning. Yeah. So, again, I was interested in the helmets, but then I wanted to say, gee, how valuable are they? How much should I be paying for some of these things? Have a choice. Here's one that's got a couple of lions on it. Here's one that's got a bird on it. What should I pay for these? Should I pay more, or is this one rarer than this one? I think I pointed out to you that one style helmet is pretty common. But this was a distribution by branch, and from that you can extrapolate what the helmet would be. For example, the field artillery guys would be one of these spikes but with a ball on top instead, or the Luftschiffers, those were the balloon fellas, they wore the chacos. And most of the helmets that you're gonna see are gonna be enlisted men's helmets, because there were so many of them. So, I've written 8 books. I brought them in for sale. If anyone is interested, $5 from every sale will go to the museum here. So, that's all I had.
If you notice, that's a pyramid of spiked helmets, 12,000 of them. At the end of World War I, we were still doing, pipe down, you've been fed.
You just thought of something.
We were still doing the war bond drives, and the government shipped, I want to say it was over 20,000 helmets to New York, and they had a pile. That one's got, I think, 12,000 in it. Then down the street was another pile, and by contributing to the war effort, you could get one of these helmets.
I know what I want. I didn't have a slide one. 1914, they went to war in these helmets. By 1915, the war had digressed to trench warfare, and they were discovering that they got a lot of head injuries. And so the coal shuttle was developed. There were 2 styles of this, only changed once halfway through the war. But it was a mass production challenge. And so what they did was they created as many as they could and sent them to the front. And the helmets stayed at the front. And as the soldiers rotated in, they just traded the helmets. So they left it when it went back. And it was phased in different parts of the front in different kingdoms. And it took them into 1916 to be able to get them all across the front.
What's the purpose of the bolts on the side?
Oh, these were to put a face mask onto it. They're not the Frankenstein connectors.
And not very stylish, are they,
No.
compared to the other ones?
Oh, no, but
But they're functional.
they still wore these when they were at home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In fact, you even see pictures of some of them into the Nazi era. And let's face it, GIs are the same across the world. We like to have associations, and we're fond of our time with, as they put it, under the colors. And so they were very proud of that. Now I'm done, I'm sorry.
And if you notice the shape of that helmet, it basically epitomizes the German soldier in 2 world wars. And when we redesigned our steel helmet, what does it look like? Nearly identical, because that's such a good design.
How did they make the decorative helmets? It doesn't look like they were stamped or hammered, because they're all real smooth. How did they actually make those? Like the one on the end there?
This one?
Yeah. How was that rounded shape made? Obviously, they made them different sizes for different soldiers.
I would say it's the same way as we make a pot today.
Stamped.
Boom, boom,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm very disorganized. I asked that we have this one because if you notice, the front plate is gray. And by the time they mobilized and went to war, they discovered a couple of things. One of them was they were running out of material. And 2, that shiny thing was kind of distracting. The soldiers wore cloth covers over the helmets at the front, but still, if they had that off. So by late 1914, by the Christmas time, they started what they called the Feldgrau, field gray. It was just a toned down effort. So when they were out at the front, they wore this type of thing. Okay. This is the general's helmet. This is an officer in the Hussars. This is a reserve officer, remember on that first chart? And so when you were in the reserves, and you wore this little cross on the front. And this is a shapka for the Uhlans, light cavalry. These were the guys that got the bad rap on the invasion of Belgium about the Uhlans spearing the babies, and they carried long lances. Long lances is a very effective tool for crowd control, and that's what they used them for. And then this is a Hussars Busby, an enlisted man, and Hussars were tended to be used as messengers or screens. So as your army advanced, you had your light cavalry out on the edges to be the bellwether before the enemy got to the main force.
So the spike really didn't serve a purpose other than.
Purely ornamental.
Yeah.
Strictly ornamental.
Yes, sir.
Well, it did give Colonel Hogan a place to put his hat. So we want to give you a little thank you for coming out tonight. A certificate of appreciations, which says to all who should see these presents, greetings. The certificate is awarded to James D. Turinetti, Lieutenant Colonel, United States Air Force retired, in recognition of his service to our great nation and for his continued dedication, commitment, and support to the ideals of patriotism this 28th day of June in the year 2024. So take that for our thanks. We appreciate it. All right, so you'll have the opportunity to come up and look at the helmets. I don't know how you are about touchy-feely, so.
I ask you to be gentle. Remember, these are all over 100 years old.
Yeah. Marvelous shape.
How many do you have?
Personally,
Yeah.
about 250.
That's
Remember, I said I wanted to get one of every one of those, and I did.
okay. Well, you don't need all those cluttering up your home.
Right. Sir?
The deadhead, what did that symbolize? The skull across
The idea was to intimidate the other guy. Really? So it's
like a pirate flag almost?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
There were 2 cuirassier regiments that wore death heads. That's these guys. I'm sorry, there were two other Hussar regiments that wore those, as well as that one. So 3 Hussars, and then there was 1 infantry regiment that wore skull and crossbones on their eagle. All of the illustrations, by the way, here just came out of my book. I didn't create anything new. I just Yes, sir?
Of all the helmets, other than the Kaiser's helmet, what is the rarest, the hardest to find?
Let me answer that this way. There's the one that everybody wants to have, and so there's a big demand for that. That's the one that the Kaiser had at the beginning with the eagle on the top.
Yeah.
The hardest to find are the ones that there were only a couple of guys that wore them. And that category are the aides de camp. They call them Flugeladjutants, Flugel little bird, wingman. And so, depending on how long the royal was in office, that will tell you how many people had served in that role. But in that case, you're talking about fewer than 10 over time. And so that I've been collecting those, and I believe that I had just gotten the rarest one a few days ago. And that's for the Duke of Braunschweig, which is the kingdom that went with that death head over there, married the Kaiser's daughter. And so he did well. And I'm going to get the Busby that his Flugeladjutant wore. So you're talking about 1s and 2s. In terms of numbers of generals, there were probably fewer than 400 generals in the wartime. So that's not a lot of helmets. Yes, sir.
Did they wear these all the time, and how do they keep them on their head? It seemed like it'd be awful.
The answer is yes, and there are the chin straps.
Yeah.
Just put those down and wear them that way. And remember, the Hussars and the Uhlans also had that strap to tie it to them. They also had cloth caps, and so it was more formal to wear the spiked helmets, but they also wore, now the officers tended to wear the spikes all the time. The enlisted men, and the sergeants were differentiated. They tended to have a bill on the front of their cap until 1915, 1916, and then they went to everybody having it.
Jim, before there was an internet, how did you pursue, especially when you were looking for specific items?
Before there was internet, I didn't look for specifics, I just wanted anything I could find. And it was mail, really. Even when I was in Germany, it was postings through the mail, ads from antique dealers. So, yeah, the internet has done a great deal. I've been able to do a lot of research on that, and easily communicate with fellow collectors. Yes, sir?
Is the spike unique strictly to Germany, or are there other countries that might have had spikes?
It is not unique. Mexico has used them. The United States has used them. And I think there are a couple of South American countries that have used them. Russia has used it. France, no. England, no. No.
We have a replica cavalry uniform up front that's got a spiked helmet with it.
US uniform?
Right, any other questions? Okay, I'm
Thank
glad
you
to
all.
see the, so we need your help. Tell your friends and family where we are. If you're on Facebook, tell your friends and family where we are. Because all of you guys are what's making this happen. So we count on that kind of support. My lovely bride said to tell everyone that there are flyers up front. Make sure everyone gets one. Everyone will get one before they leave, so that I can truthfully tell her that everyone got one. And, well, just keep coming back for these speaker series. We've got the program throughout the year. You're going to learn stuff here that you're not going to learn anywhere else.
Amen.
Here, here.
2 weeks, next week.
The next one is July 12th?
July 12th. Talking about ethical issues in healthcare and combat zone. I was in Kuwait when the war started in 2003 as the hospital commander, and we were told to do some things that were questionable. I want to talk about those.
Well,
That sounds interesting.
Are you going on vacation?
I think I'll be there for that.
Yeah.
No, we're going on a
The
train ride,
questionable thing.
the 12th.
You can always go another time.
No, yeah, that's the problem, yeah. I wish. There's in Orbisonia, Pennsylvania, a few people are knowledgeable of Pennsylvania. Orbisonia. Took me almost 50 years to learn how to spell that.
All right, thanks again for coming out, and it's good to see y'all.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, sir.
It's all in there.